start? Okay, so first of all, I'd like to thank the organizers for inviting me to speak here. In this talk, I'll describe some attempts to try to understand black hole entropy and its connection to ADS to CFT-on correspondence. Most of what I'm going to talk about is given in some form or other in these two papers, and also there is some work in progress. And I should mention that this work, of course, is built on work of many people and of many papers, but here are some of the papers which are closest to the subject of the talk. Now, as we all know, one of the successes of string theory has been an explanation of the Bekenson-Hawking entropy of a class of supersymmetric black holes in terms of microscopic quantum states. And for these class of black holes, one finds that the Bekenson-Hawking entropy can be reinterpreted as a logarithm of the microstate degeneracy. And this formula is remarkable because on the left hand side we have something which is purely geometric, the area of the event horizon divided by 4 times the Newton's constant, whereas on the right hand side you have a completely microscopic calculation which just counts states. Now, originally the comparison between black hole and statistical entropy was carried out in the limit of large charges, and in this limit various things simplify. First of all, the curvature is small, so you can use two derivative approximation to gravity, and on the microscopic side for large charges we can use what was the problem? Is there something I see. Yeah. Let me go back. Okay, so as I was saying, the calculation simplifies on both sides, but the question that I would like to address is it possible to go beyond this limit? And clearly, in order to study this problem, we need to address two separate issues. First of all, we need to learn how to take into account the effect of higher derivative terms and quantum corrections on the computation of the black hole entropy. And on the microscopic side, we need to know how to calculate statistical entropy to greater accuracy. Now, in string theory with sufficient amount of supersymmetry, we now have a good control over the counting of microstates and computing statistical entropy for supersymmetric extremal black holes. And this was reviewed in detail in the last talk by Boris. So what I plan to do in this talk is to address the other side of the problem, namely the problem of computing higher derivative and quantum corrections to extremal black hole entropy, and see how far we can go. Now, as far as the higher derivative corrections are concerned, we have a very general framework. This was developed by Wald, and it is valid not only for extremal black holes but for any general black holes. And for extremal black holes, Wald's formula can be simplified enormously in what is known as the entropy function formalism. And so our main goal will be not to try to understand higher derivative corrections, which are well understood anyway, but will be to try to understand the effect of quantum corrections on extremal black hole entropy. Okay, but to do this, we will have to first begin with a lightning review of the entropy function formalism that allows us to calculate higher derivative corrections to black hole entropy. So this formalism begins with the basic postulate that an extremal black hole has an ADS2 factor, or equivalently an SO2,1 isometry in the near horizon geometry. This has been partially proven in some cases. Okay, we will take this as an assumption, and all known extremal black holes certainly display this feature. Now, because of this fact, if we go near the horizon, there is an ADS2 factor, and now we can regard all other directions, including the angular coordinates of space-time, as compact, and we can regard the near horizon geometry of an extremal black hole as essentially a two-dimensional geometry times a compact space. Okay, the two-dimensional geometry is described by ADS2, and then there is some compact space which includes the usual compact directions as well as the angular coordinates, and typically this compact space can be also fibered over ADS2. Now let's consider string theory in such a background. It contains infinite number of fields, but we will focus on two spatial classes of fields, the two-dimensional metric and U1 gauge fields, but as I said, there are also many other fields which are present. And now one can write down the most general field configuration near the horizon that is consistent with SO2,1 isometry. And it turns out that this constraint is highly restrictive. In particular, SO2,1 isometry means that the space must be homogeneous, and hence it cannot have any dependence on the coordinates of ADS2. The field configuration will be essentially independent of the coordinates of ADS2. And so the metric, for example, can be characterized uniquely by a form like this, where V is some parameter. When I say uniquely, it's of course up to reparameterization. The gauge field strength is forced to be a constant, and all the other fields are also parameterized by a set of constants. Now let's suppose that we denote by L2 the two-dimensional Lagrangian density evaluated in this background. So it is obviously going to be a function of the near horizon parameters, V, the EIs, and whatever other parameters you have here. So we now define what one calls the entropy function. It's a function of all the near horizon parameters and an extra set of variables which play the role of electric charges. So the number of Q's is the same as the number of electric fields, okay, and this is defined simply by this relation over here. And now one can show, based on equations of motion and World's formula for entropy, that if we consider a black hole of charge Q, then all the near horizon parameters are obtained by extremizing this entropy function with respect to these near horizon parameters, namely V, EI, and whatever other parameters you might have. And furthermore, the world entropy is simply given by the value of the entropy function at this extremum. So at this level, if we ignore quantum corrections, what we should do is to compare the world entropy with the log of the microstate degeneracy. Now I should just add here that what I refer to by Q here, Q corresponds to what we normally call the electric charges. Okay, because the magnetic charges are characterized by magnetic flux through the angular coordinates, and that information is encoded in the details about the compactification. So that's of course encoded in L2, but magnetic charges are not going to play any role in what we are going to discuss. We keep them as fixed. Okay, so our goal now is to try to generalize this formula taking into account quantum corrections. And before I give the proposed generalization of this formula, let me just make a few comments. First of all, we shall not make use of supersymmetry explicitly. Okay. Although supersymmetry is undoubtedly useful in ensuring stability of the extremal BPS black holes. Okay. But at least we will not explicitly make use of supersymmetry in our analysis. The second point that I want to emphasize is that we will carry out some semi-classical part of semi-classical analysis, and this analysis will be close to what is conventionally known as the Euclidean approach to black hole thermodynamics. Okay. However, the main difference between what we are going to do and the usual Euclidean approach to black hole thermodynamics is that we shall work entirely in the near horizon geometry of the black hole instead of considering the full black hole solution. Okay. Whereas in the usual Euclidean approach, one deals with the full black hole solution. And finally, we shall assume that there are no multi-centered black holes degenerate with the single-centered extremal black holes which we are going to analyze. Okay. And so what I refer to as d micro will essentially contribute only to the entropy of single-centered BPS black holes. Okay. And this can be achieved by appropriately setting the asymptotic moduli to be what are known as the attractor values, because it is known that when the asymptotic values of the moduli fields are set equal to their attractor values, then only the single-centered black holes survive, and the multi-centered black holes which are mentioned in the last talk, they disappear. Okay, so this is the way we will define the microscopic degeneracy. Okay, so now let me give the suggestion as to what is the full quantum version of the relationship between the black hole entropy or the geometric side, okay, and the microscopic side. Okay. And this is the proposed relation. Okay. Now, if we look at the right hand side, okay, you will recognize that this is very close to, in fact, it is exactly the OSB partition function. Okay. The left hand side is what we will take as the generalization of the world entropy. Okay. What is this? This is the Euclidean partition function of string theory on ADS2, in ADS2 background, given by the attractor geometry correspond to the electric fields E. That's the definition of this, and we will try to make it more explicit as I go on. So of course, I don't have any proof. Okay. What I'll try to do is to justify this by two means. Okay. First of all, I'll try to show that in the classical limit, okay, this gives us back the usual relationship between the world entropy and the statistical entropy. Okay. And then I'll try to argue that this formula that I just wrote down fits in with the usual rules of ADS CFT correspondence. Okay, I'll describe again in what sense we are going to use ADS CFT correspondence. Okay. And here I just wanted to mention that one way to take the classical limit will be to simply scale the Lagrangian density by some large number lambda, and at the same time scale the electric charges by some large number lambda. Okay, so first then let's try to recover the classical world entropy from the formula that I just wrote down. So here is the metric, okay, and the gauge field strength. There are various other fields which I have not written down. Okay. So in order to define the partition function on ADS2, you have to make a Euclidean continuation. So you do that by replacing t by minus I theta. And just for convenience, I have also introduced another variable eta related to this radial variable r via this relation. And if we substitute these in this background, in this solution over here, we will find that the metric becomes the standard global ADS2 metric, Euclidean ADS2 metric, with parameterized by the size v, and the gauge field strength takes this form. And given the form of the gauge field strength, we can now integrate and get the gauge field. Now from this metric, it's clear that the eta equal to 0 is a completely regular point. Okay, that's the interior, that's the center of the disk, and so we must require that the gauge fields vanish, the theta component of the gauge field vanishes at eta equal to 0, and that forces us to have the subtraction term minus 1. Okay, and this is going to play a crucial role in what we are going to say later. Okay, so first we want to verify that the relation that I wrote down reproduces world's entropy on the left hand side. So we need to calculate the classical supergravity partition function, okay, or classical string theory partition function. In this, by supergravity I meant supergravity plus all possible hard derivative corrections. which appear at tree level. So this is given by exponential of minus the Euclidean action. Okay. And here we encounter a problem because ADS2 of course has infinite volume, and so one expects that the Euclidean action evaluated in the attractor geometry would be infinite. Okay. And as is usual in ADS CFT correspondence, we regularize by putting a cutoff at some fixed radial coordinate eta equal to eta naught, or in terms of the original variable r, this corresponds to r equal to r naught. And once we have done this, we can evaluate the volume, for example, of ADS2, and this is what we get. Okay, this minus 1 comes because cos hyperbolic eta evaluated at 0 is 1. And again this minus 1 is going to play an important role in what we are going to say later. Okay, so once we have regularized ADS2 in this way, the bulk entropy is easy to calculate. You just take the volume and multiply by the Lagrangian density. Okay. And the reason that you can do it is because in the attractor geometry, the Lagrangian density doesn't depend on the coordinates of ADS2. Okay. Homogeneity of ADS2 guarantees that this is just a constant, so you just multiply the volume by the Lagrangian density. Okay. Now of course, this is not the complete contribution to the action. In a theory of gravity, typically you have to add boundary terms, okay, and there is a lot of freedom in what kind of boundary terms you should add. Okay. So we can write down a contribution for boundary term, and the important point, okay, I will not try to derive this, okay, but let me mention what one can show by just by examining the structure of the boundary is that whatever boundary term you write, okay, the dependence on the cutoff R naught is linear, and then there is a term of order R naught inverse, these are corrections, but there is no constant term in the boundary action. So now we can combine these two and calculate the partition function on ADS2, and this is what we get. Okay, so this term, the coefficient of R naught, depends on the specifics of the boundary term, okay, but there is a term here which is completely unambiguous, which is the finite piece, okay, and then there are corrections of order R naught inverse. This is the classical ADS2 partition function. Okay. Now typically in ADS CFT correspondence, one tries to cancel this boundary term, okay, the R naught dependent term, by simply adjusting the boundary term. Okay, this is, we can think of this as the boundary counter terms. We can do that here, okay, but we need not do that. We will find the appropriate interpretation of these counter terms later. But what we are going to call ZADS2 is essentially the finite piece. Okay. So we can imagine that for tentatively we have adjusted K to cancel off the divergent part, but the finite part is completely unambiguous, okay, and this is our definition of ZADS2. And so our proposal in the classical limit then amounts to a relation like this. Okay, so here I have written that down again. So what we have done is to evaluate the left hand side in the classical limit, but now we have to also study the right hand side in the classical limit. Okay. And in this limit we expect that the summand will be sharply peaked because Q is large. Okay. So we can replace the right hand side by simply the value of this at its maximum, and this gives the classical relationship, okay, the reduction of whatever formula we had written down in the classical limit, which is given here, okay, and this of course have to be evaluated at the maximum of the right hand side. And now we see that world entropy, we recall that the world entropy was given by this formula over here at the extremum of the right hand side with respect to E, and if we compare this with this, we will find that indeed the world entropy is the log of the microscopic degeneracy. Okay, so the proposed formula between the ADS2 partition function and the OSB partition function reduces to the relationship between the world entropy and the log of the microscopic degeneracy in the large charge or equivalently classical limit. Now at this point I will also like to write down the expected form of the ADS2 partition function in the full quantum theory, and this has to be done by simply summing over all other saddle points, okay, and also studying quantum fluctuations. And you expect that the generic form of the ADS2 partition function will be like this. So there will be a term which is linear in R naught, okay, whose coefficients will depend on what boundary terms we have added to the action. Okay. But then there will be a term which is independent of R naught. Okay, I will denote this by some effective Lagrangian density evaluated in the attractor geometry, okay, and this can in principle be calculated using perturbation theory. Okay, if you are interested in only the perturbative test of this formula, we can simply calculate this by doing one loop perturbation theory, which involves just evaluating the determinants of various fields in the attractor geometry, and then we can go beyond. So let me now discuss how this is related to ADS2 CFT1 correspondence. Okay. And here we are going to use the usual lore of ADS CFT correspondence, namely that the partition function of string theory on ADS2, first of all the string theory on ADS2 should be equivalent to some CFT1 living on the boundary of ADS2, and the partition function of ADS2 should be simply the partition function of that CFT1. Okay. And here by partition function, if had it been a d plus 1 dimensional ADS, the partition function will simply refer to the path integral in the corresponding CFT on a d dimensional sphere. Okay. It just so happens that in the case of ADS2 the d dimensional sphere is actually 1 dimensional circle. So this will be the partition function of CFT1 on a 1 dimensional circle. And let us now go ahead and analyze what we expect for this CFT1 partition function. Now here I will mention a slightly different convention that I will use compared to usual ADS CFT correspondence. Conventionally one uses units in which the size of the boundary is kept fixed. Okay, so if you have a d dimensional sphere as the boundary of ADS d plus 1, we keep the size of the boundary kept fixed, and as we take R naught to infinity, that would correspond to the ultraviolet length cutoff going to 0. Okay, so the ultraviolet length cutoff is essentially proportional to 1 over R naught. We will use a slightly different convention in which the ultraviolet cutoff is fixed, but the size of the boundary is of order R naught. Okay, it's entirely equivalent because the final answer really depends on the ratio of the size of the boundary to the ultraviolet cutoff. And we will do this by parameterizing the boundary not by the angular coordinate theta, but by the coordinate w, which is the rescale version of theta. And because theta had period 2 pi, w will have period 2 pi R naught. So let us examine the field configuration near the boundary, near R equal to R naught. This is the metric, okay, with corrections of order R naught to the minus 2, and this is what you get for the gauge field. Okay, you notice that there is this R naught inverse term. This is the reflection of that minus 1 we had in the expression for the gauge field when we integrated the field strength to get the form of the gauge field. And now notice that this background, okay, looks a little different from the usual boundary metric of ADS2 in the sense that there is no infinite conformal factor in front of the metric, okay, and that simply reflects the fact that we have used this rescale coordinate w, so whatever would have been the infinite conformal factor we absorb in this coordinate w. Okay. And it is in this sense that in the w coordinate system the ultraviolet length cutoff is finite. Normally this infinite conformal factor represents a ultraviolet cutoff. Okay. So in the w coordinate system the ultraviolet cutoff is finite, but then you can also see that the size of the w coordinate becomes large in the R naught going to infinity limit. Okay, so let us define H as the generator of w translation in CFT1 in the R naught going to infinity limit. Okay, and what I mean by this is that H captures the effect of the boundary field configuration except this order R naught inverse piece here and order R naught to the minus 2 pieces here. And let's also denote by Qi the conserved charge that is dual to MUI in CFT1. Then because we have CFT1 put on a circle, and this is very special to ADS2, let me emphasize again that if we had done the same analysis for an ADS D plus 1, the CFT1 would be put on a d-dimensional sphere and we will not have any direct interpretation in terms of any conformal field theory, okay, as a trace. Okay. But here, because the CFT1 lives on a circle, we can rewrite the CFT1 partition function as a trace. Okay. You see that this 2 pi R naught simply reflects the period of W. And now there is an extra piece here, okay, and this is a reflection of the order R naught inverse piece in the expression for the gauge field. Okay, because order R naught inverse term here multiplied by the length gives you a finite piece, and once you work out all the normalizations and signs, you find that this is what you need to evaluate in CFT1, okay, to get the partition function. Okay, so here are the two relations. Z CFT1 is given by this, Z ADS2 is given by this. This is the general form, as I said, that one expects. And let's now compare the two in the R naught going to infinity limit. And in this limit, one expects that this trace will get contribution only from the ground state of H. Okay. So if the ground state of H is E naught and there are dq ground states of charge Q, okay, then the equality between these two for large R naught can be rewritten in this form. Okay. So here I have written the relationship again. Okay, this is what our postulate reduces to. Okay, but dq is, we don't know what CFT1 is as yet, it's some abstract object, but dq, whatever it is, dq is the degeneracy of the ground states of the CFT with charge q. If you compare the two, we see that we can identify this coefficient c with the ground state degeneracy, and so by adjusting the boundary counter terms to set c equal to 0 is the same as setting the ground state energy to 0. Okay. And then we have the other relation that this quantity here is given by e to the minus 2 pi v L2 effective, and this is what we call Z ADS2. So if you compare this, okay, which one naturally expects from the ADS2 CFT1 correspondence, whatever CFT1 be dual to ADS2. Okay. So if you compare this with our proposal, okay, then we see that this proposal essentially amounts to saying that d of q, okay, the degeneracy of ground state of the CFT with charge q, should be the same as d micros of q, namely the degeneracy of microstates with charge q. Okay. And this is in the usual spirit of ADS CFT correspondence, that you first consider some microscopic configuration, okay, like free brain, okay, look at its low energy dynamics, okay, which is the analog of calculating d micro q, and that low energy dynamics you identify with the theory that lives on the boundary of the corresponding ADS space, okay, which in this case is CFT1. Okay. And it is in this sense that the proposal that we made initially essentially is in the spirit of the usual ADS CFT correspondence. Okay. So let me now discuss some special cases, what this could imply for the Weisbach conjecture, okay, which refers to n equal to 2 supersymmetric string theories. Okay, in particular we will take type 2a string theory on Calabi-Yau threefold. Okay. And what I will try to argue, although we have not certainly done this calculation, in this case the left hand side may actually be computable using supersymmetry. So for this, let us recall that the ADS2 partition function, okay, is just exponential minus 2 pi v times some effective action. Now if we assume that this effective action, okay, gets contribution only from the F type terms, okay, these are mentioned by Boris in his lecture, okay, then we can calculate what the right hand side is, okay, and right hand side of this is simply the topological string partition function squared. Okay. And so in that case ZADS2 will be the square of the topological string partition function, and equating ZADS2 to the OSB partition function amounts to declaring that the OSB partition function is the topological string partition function squared. Now this of course is not a complete story. In general there could be other quantum corrections, okay, except the ones from the F-type term, but one expects that because of the strong supersymmetry of the background, the other quantum corrections should be strongly constrained. Okay. In particular, one hopes that the expected form of the ADS2 partition function will have a contribution from the topological string partition function squared. These are the F-type terms which of course do contribute. Okay. And these will be multiplied by simple major factors. Okay. These major factors, for example, could come from evaluating determinants of various fields in the ADS background. Okay. And this in principle is a completely well defined problem. Okay. We have the theory, we have an ADS2 background in the attractor geometry, so in principle one could go ahead and start evaluating these, at least the one loop determinant. Okay. There are various techniques which exist for one loop determinant, and one could try to verify, for example, that whether whatever correction one gets from the gravity side, okay, is the same kind of corrections which appear from the microscopic counting. Okay, from the microscopic counting we certainly know that the OSB partition function is not just this, there are additional corrections, and if one can do this computation on ADS2, this will give the appropriate corrections computed from the gravity side. Okay. And this would indeed provide a strong taste of the macroscopic versus microscopic entropy of the black hole. Okay. Beyond, not only including higher derivative corrections, but also including quantum corrections. So I'll just conclude by just summarizing the two main points that I tried to emphasize. Okay. So what we gave is a proposal for relating the extremal black hole entropy to the microscopic degeneracy of states. Okay. And the relationship that we proposed is something like this: the ADS2 partition function, okay, which I described how to define, okay, is equal to the OSB partition function. Okay. We saw that this reduces to the usual relationship between world entropy and statistical entropy in the classical limit, okay, and this is also in the spirit of ADS-CFT correspondence. And finally, I also mentioned that it may be possible to subject this to precision tests, at least for supersymmetric black holes, for which microscopic degeneracies are known. Okay. So all one needs to do is to simply try to evaluate the left hand side beyond the semi-classical approximation and see if the two sides agree. So I'll stop here. Thank you. Yes.
So we have in addition to those, we have an identification of the energy term.
Yes.
You have to check of that identification as well.
See, the energy term depends a lot on what boundary terms you add. So I'm not sure that one can do much check on the energy term. I mean, you can adjust the boundary term to set the energy equal to 0. There is no natural, at least I didn't find any natural term that one can add.
So from a macroscopic point of view, what we are evaluating is the finite size effect.
Yes, that's right.
And usually thermodynamic consideration for finite size effect requires some careful tuning of boundary conditions, etc. Can you specify how you are treating this?
See, these finite size effects are coming really from the interior of ADS2. Because if you see what was the origin of these terms, let me try to go back. Okay, there are these two terms which essentially played the important role. One is in the volume of ADS2, there is a -1. Okay? And this came not because of any effect of the boundary, but because at eta equal to 0, which is really the center of ADS, the cos hyperbolic eta becomes equal to 1. Right? So as long as you put the cutoff at a finite any r equal to r naught, this term is completely unambiguous. Okay? And the other this is also finite size effect, okay, which is this -1. This was responsible for this e to the minus 2 pi e dot q, which came in the partition function. Again, that is essentially by requiring the gauge fields to be non-singular at eta equal to 0. Okay? So it is, if it is finite size effect, but it's not really from the boundary.
A very short question, because there are two announcements about the upcoming strings
For a CFT, I would expect the spectrum to be continuous. So when you isolate out the contribution from the ground states, you can do that because, is it true that you can do that because you've got a UV cutoff?
Yes. Yes, exactly. I mean, in fact, we did this. We tried to see what this Hamiltonian corresponds to if we take an extremal BTZ black hole. Okay. And there we found that this Hamiltonian is essentially the L0 bar. So going to the lowest eigenvalue of the Hamiltonian, essentially setting L0 bar of the corresponding CFT2 to 0. Okay. So from that point of view, so at least in that example, Hamiltonian really had a discrete spectrum. Okay. And the CFT1 essentially corresponds to just the collection of ground states, because anything which is excited, okay, will go to infinite energy when you rescale back, so that the ultraviolet cutoff goes to infinity, okay, and the infrared, the size of the box is finite.
Okay, so let's thank Ashok.
Yeah, let me remind you first that just in the break, we will have the photo of the conference, which will be downstairs here. And now